Kia ora. This is a special episode of the Homefullness Show, where we're actually talking about the sustainability of the show and the other programs which are now under the banner of Homefullness. So in recent times, I've really had to look at the sustainability of my own self and my ability to contribute to this mission. Homefullness and Common Ground have been about building the capacity and the connections to enable more affordable, collective, and regenerative housing around the world, and particularly where I'm living in Aotearoa, New Zealand. And why I think this particular focus is really important is for many different reasons. Well, firstly, why did I choose the name Homefullness? I felt that a lot of the work being done around affordability was really on homelessness. So it was looking at almost like the victimhood of people who have ended up in a place where they are homeless. And I thought, rather, let's put our energy into creating spaces and narratives around what is it like for people to be able to design and co-create the kind of housing which enables a better way of life. And where people and planet are the values that drive that kind of housing and neighborhood development, rather than just thinking about housing as a structure in which people live and go about their daily lives. This also came from my own desire and need for better housing. Now, my profession is in community development, and I've been able to be involved in housing in different ways throughout my career and my learning. When I was doing my master's degree, I learned about the community land trust model, which removes land from the market and puts it into community stewardship. And then the housing that is done on a community land trust is thereby a reduction of the price of what normal property is, because people are just paying for the house itself rather than the house in the land. The land stays in community stewardship, and so the house is sold back to the land trust to make it affordable for the next round of people who want to live there. So that was one model that I learned of that I thought that is something that would bring ongoing affordability to housing. And when I noticed that housing was very unaffordable where I'm living in Aotearoa, New Zealand, I thought that would be a great model to help people to put into place in their local communities. And to go back just a little bit further, when I was at university as an undergraduate, I got to volunteer with Habitat for Humanity, where we helped to build houses. And that was my first introduction to actually participating in the building of someone's house. And that was really exciting to me, to be able to contribute in a really physical way and work with the homeowners. Later in South Africa, I then worked for Habitat for Humanity as the event and volunteer manager, hosting many events, bringing people together from various walks of life, whether they be women for the women's build, corporates for the corporate build, churches for the church build, or young people for the youth build, plus working in rural areas for orphans or the child-headed households. So a wide variety of house building experiences that I found really rewarding, and realized that actually people do like to contribute to building and creating their own house if given an opportunity. Then while doing my master's degree, I learned about ecovillages and intentional communities, and I got a chance to visit one. And for the first time, I really appreciated what it was like for people to have designed their own house where they work together collectively, ongoing, to have that community be formed and managed by the values of the people that were living there. This particular community was kind of off-grid, meaning it supplied its own electricity and power, and I really found that also quite interesting. Later on, I found out about natural building and ways that people could build out of straw bale and cob and clay, and thought, wow, if that can be done as well to incorporate different natural and more sustainable building methods, and people have an opportunity to be involved, yes, that's something I also want to do. Back in South Africa, where I lived from 2002 to 2016, I moved onto an emerging intentional community and built my house out of recycled and natural materials, and lived in this community for 9 years. If you want to hear more about that story, I interviewed my daughter about what it was like to grow up in rural South Africa and in an intentional community. Then when I moved to New Zealand, we really did battle to find good quality housing. It was shabby, facing the wrong direction, so it was cold, not well insulated, not well kept up, and for the price of what we were paying for rent, I was quite flabbergasted. And then only to find that this was a problem throughout the country. And actually, as a mother raising teenagers, I really wanted to be in a more close-knit community where I could feel like my neighbors were my friends and we could exchange. And that was a desire that I had, but it was really not that easy to be able to create for myself, being a new migrant and also raising two teenagers. It was not something that I was quite clear how I was going to create myself. Yet I knew that if I focused on this, I would either find it or I'd be able to create it eventually. And that's when I decided to start Common Ground. When I realized that this was not something that just I wanted, but many other people in the country were searching for a way to find others who either had that same desire, had land to offer, needing the tools and the resources to be able to create community. And so Common Ground was born as a way to offer consultancy and advice, workshops and trainings that would help councils to be able to enable this kind of housing, or groups who wanted to figure out what was their vision and what was it that they wanted to create. Well, shortly after starting that, I became a single mother. My partner left the house that we owned together. He wanted his money and we had to sell it. I did an article on this about recipes for homelessness. And that is where we were actually ending up homeless in a sense. We always had a roof over our head, but we were going from couch surf to couch surf or Airbnb, trying to figure out how to get a rental. Now, you might think all you have to do is apply and then you get to rent the house that you want. Not is the case in Hamilton, where we were kind of stranded. Basically, it was that there's way too many people applying, 40 to 60 people on average per one house that was available. So although we did find houses and we applied for them, we were not chosen to be the family that could get that house. Very frustrating to be stuck in this gap where we were not able to get the house that I could just afford it, but even that we weren't able to get it. And so out of my own frustration of not being able to get the kind of house that I want, realizing other people had this desire, not wanting to focus on homelessness, but rather homefullness, then that's where I went with Common Ground to be able to offer programs that would bring people together. So what that has resulted in to date is the Women Revolutionizing Housing, where I could find all these women around the country and thought, let's bring us together. So in 2021, I hosted the first Women Revolutionizing Housing Hui and have since done so every 2 years with hosting online gatherings where we have speakers and women who've got projects can share about that. It's a peer-to-peer learning network, and some women also find each other to collaborate on projects where they are, which has been really wonderful to see what has grown out of this network and from the Hui, which is very invigorating for women to all get together and have that special time. Out of that grew the Homefullness Show, where I wanted to give case studies and examples of housing models that are better working. So there's models like the community land trust, co-housing, ecovillages, cooperative housing. I've covered all of those models on the show, where I give insider information from the people who create such things in terms of how do you make it happen? How do you start such a thing? How does it get funded and financed? What are the policies and the planning rules that either help or hinder this kind of development? And I interview people from different countries and from Aotearoa New Zealand to show what is possible and what do people want and how to get there. So the Homefullness Show has now since published 28 episodes, and I have many more stories that I'd love to be able to share, more people and guests to invite, as well as just some of my own stories that have to do with housing. And then lastly, the idea that I came up with to empower and build the capability of people who have a desire to create some form of housing, whether it be in their own backyard or something as big as a co-housing community, is the property development course for community-focused housing leaders or people who want to join such a community and feel like they want more information to be able to do so. So this is an idea that I've had to curate modules, a basic property development course, the fundamentals, and then the modules that are specific to community focused and affordability. So these are the three things that I have been sustaining pretty much since 2019. I bought a domain, commonground.net.nz. I have a subscription for hosting of the website, which is on Squarespace, a way to send newsletters. Calendly, which is a booking app, so people can be a guest and book through there. The Descript, which is helping me with the video editing, and Canva, which helps with putting images together, and a few other software that I have got to help to make all of this possible. Well, I have been funding this out of my pocket to date. And this really is a for purpose. It's a mission focused for the greater good movement. And as you might know, Homefullness doesn't really charge for anything. There's a Patreon page for Homefullness, which I do encourage people in every episode to contribute to. You go to Patreon and find Homefullness. And now I have gotten to the point, financially and time-wise, I am no longer able to sustain this amazing mission that we have on my own. And it doesn't make sense to do so either. So now is the time when I'm inviting anyone who believes in this mission of enabling more affordable and connected and regenerative housing and neighborhood solutions in urban, peri-urban, and rural environments, where we can have a better quality of life, where it's inclusive and more people feel a greater sense of belonging and contribution and connection and vitality where they are living, to be able to co-create and be a part of the design or the management of those neighborhoods, where they can look after their local communities and really get a sense that they are part of something bigger. That's what Homefullness is about. Enabling opportunities for people who might otherwise fall through the gaps, like myself, single mothers raising children who cannot necessarily afford to buy into one of these, that need that aspect of affordability also to be included in this kind of collective housing. This is the intersection of all of these three things that's so important, that we raise the stories and build the capability. I don't want to do it alone any longer. It's actually quite lonely working on my own in this space when I know there's so many others that would love to contribute, and that would be so much more fun to do so. So this is the way I'm moving forward with this mission. Homefullness is looking to create its own entity, whether that be an incorporated society or an unincorporated association. So it's fitting into a more collective, governed and leadership space where a few people help to make the direction of how this goes forward. And then there's the projects. There's the Women Revolutionizing Housing, the Homefullness Show, and the Property Development course, which people can contribute to any one of these as well with bringing that forward. And then there's the funding and the sponsorship, because I think there's enough businesses that align with these missions of affordability and better ways of living and regeneration of communities that would love to put their brand to this mission. And also there might be funders out there that align and would love to sustain this work. So what does this mean financially and time-wise for the Homefullness mission to continue? Well, I estimate that with the Homefullness Show, it's about a day to a day and a half minimally to do an episode. And it would be wonderful to have 2 episodes a month because there's so many stories to cover. And that requires human labor. And of course, sponsorship can help to cover that, and so could funding. But initially, there needs to be someone paid for a day to a day and a half, ideally twice a week. The Women Revolutionizing Housing is only about a 2-hour-a-month commitment for the online networking Zoom events, but for the HUI to be organized by the end of June 2027, it does require human resource to be able to do all the coordinating of how that HUI are going to be put together. It has a chance to earn income through the sale of tickets and registration, but I'd like to keep that as affordable as possible to be as inclusive as possible, so women can come no matter what their financial ability is. And then for the property development course, again, we'll take someone or a group of people to put together and curate modules and subject matter experts that are particular property development in the space. And of course, we can earn money by selling course registration, but initially that will take a few people's hours to put together. And that's what this funding is for. There is the Patreon page, but if people are giving only $5 a month or even $25 a month, that still is not quite enough to sustain all that is needed, at least initially, to keep this all going, because software does have costs. So what I'm looking at is developing a Pledge Me campaign over the next couple weeks with the people who say they would like to step up into this homeful leadership space, that we develop a Pledge Me campaign, putting together the amount of money that we think we need to sustain the software and the human resource to get this all going for the next year. And then we can put the income that is earned back into the Homefullness entity, not my pocket, but the pocket of the entity itself. Again, I cannot sustain taking out of my pocket to pay for these things, and hence the entity fundraising to be able to do so. And of course, the more people that are involved, the more that the mission spreads. Money-wise, I have estimated that it will cost around $18,000 to do all these 3 projects through to the end of June 2027, with income maybe even about the same going back into the organization. But we do need this initial upfront money to be raised and people to step forward to help to drive and create really expansive strategies for each one of these to serve the mission better. So if this is something where you'd like to take even a little bit of leadership or some contribution of your time or your money, there's ways that you can do that. I have a survey, which is collecting information from people about how they'd like to contribute. There is Patreon, the Homefullness Show, where you can go and give right away. And there is then the Pledge Me campaign that will be coming up where you can contribute in that way. The other way is if you've got a story to share. Love to hear how Homefullness, the work that we've been doing to date, has benefited you, or where you see future benefit if we continue. And also, if you'd like to be guest on the show and share a project that you've been involved in to create more homefullness where you're living, doesn't have to be something big. These kinds of stories are really relevant to show how everyday people in simple ways are creating homefullness where they are, building connections and community. So this is a way that all of us can contribute in some way. If you would like to email me, I'm at zola@commonground.net.nz. And my cell phone number, if you want to WhatsApp or call, is country code 64-27-449-0422. And so what happens, you might be asking, if we don't get people stepping up and if we don't raise the money? Well, it'll be something that I have to put on the shelf because, again, I don't have the money or the time to give as much as I have. What I do want to do with my time is create an income generating business where I'm able to financially sustain myself. So what I'm moving into is creating Common Ground as a training and facilitation and consulting business where I work with teams, families, businesses, and organizations, where I help them with communication and collaboration, conflict transformation, and the building of a group culture that is harmonious and fun and sustaining and vital, and where people feel like they can belong and contribute and feel valued. So this is what I'd like to do with Common Ground, which of course, as you can see, does overlap with Homefullness, but I'm looking to work with groups on courses, programs, and retreats where we can do this in person together, ideally. Thank you so much for being a supporter of the show so far and of any of these programs that you've been a part of. I look forward to having your continued participation, hearing from you, and hopefully being able to work together in the future. Kia ora.